Hello, and welcome back to Hunter Tuned. Today I'm going to kind of show you guys the main shaft on a B-Series transmission, and I kind of wanted to just break this thing down for you guys and show you all the parts. So I'm going to be putting carbon line synchros from Synchrotech transmissions into this GSR transmission to hopefully improve some of the shifting, and we're kind of just going to inspect the synchros, the shift collars, the bearings, and all that kind of stuff to make sure everything else in the transmission, at least on the main shaft, is good. So we're just going to get right into it, guys. To start off, we're going to, well, this thing is a complete stack so far. It's exactly how it comes out of the transmission, just like you see it here. And if we put it with the splines down, looking at it on the top here, you're going to have the bearing. So this is going to be your main shaft bearing that mates up into the transmission case. This bearing actually rides on a little groove or a little, spot in the transmission case, to be able to spin. So we're going to remove this guy first. Sometimes they're stuck on here. Sometimes they get stuck in the case when you take the case half off. But we're just going to try to wiggle this thing out of here, just like this. So there we are. Now we have the bearing, the main shaft bearing taken off, and we just to do a quick and dirty inspection on it, we can kind of just spin it. I take two fingers and I shove it in the inner race of the bearing here, and I just kind of spin the outside of it and listen for any noises or anything like that. But this thing's super smooth. It seems to be good. So another thing to note when you put these bearings on and off, this is the the bearing that goes on the top of all this. There's lettering on it, and the lettering needs to face up. If you put it on backwards, it might break. I don't know. But anyways, this bearing seems to be good to go. So we're going to put that off and know that that's our first piece that comes off, and last piece to go back on. So next we're going to have this little collar thing. This is just a spacer. Not really a spacer, but it's got two little indents in it, two little grooves, and they ride on a piece that comes off next. But this is the, it's like the little locking tab that also sits into the case. So when you put this transmission together, you have to line up that tab on the top with the tab in the case. So when that tab, you just need to have it, line up when you put the case together or whatever. But we'll take this guy off, and honestly, when I take this top section off, I usually take it off we'll just do this for demonstration. But so the tab is next after the bearing, and then after that we have, this is another piece that goes on after that, or comes off after that, and then there's a bearing that rides on the inside of that. So we'll take off the bearing with it, and it's got a little collar. There's some frickin' metal in here, guys. There's quite a bit of metal in this. Alright, so here's a roller bearing that sits underneath that tab thing and rides into this. And then there's also two indentations on it that this tab washer thing lines up with those tabs on this guy. So we're just going to put all this stuff together with the bearing on the inside of it, like so. We'll put that off to the side. And then next we're going to have a synchro. I believe this is the synchro for, I'm not sure what gear, might be 5th. But this is the largest synchro of them all. So this is going to, like I said, this is going to be the largest of all the synchros. So we're going to inspect the ring on the synchro. So this guy right here, this is the ring that goes around the synchro, and a good way to know if those are bad is to just see if they're flattened out at all. This one still has a nice round shape to it, so I think that is good. Another indentation when synchros go bad is they'll burr up on the back side, where my finger is riding here. They'll burr up, so a lot of guys will just take a file to them, kind of clean them back off and throw them right back in. But this is a good synchro. I wouldn't expect this one to be bad, being 5th gear. So yeah, that's going to be the next thing. And when this comes off, it sits backwards. Or not backwards, but I don't know. I'm trying to explain this stuff and it's kind of hard. But okay, so it's got tabs and shit that all got to line up in the grooves. and then once they line up, it kind of just sets right into place. You can't really put these on wrong, or put them in wrong. You just kind of got to spin it till it lines up in the tabs, because like I said, there's 3 tabs on all the outside here, and they all need to line up with the tabs on this next piece that's coming off. So the next part is the shift collar. So this collar rides up and down to grab each individual gear. So when the shift fork moves this thing, it will lock the gear. It'll go to the synchro and then lock onto the gear. So that's going to be the next piece that comes off. Just looks like this. And then we have this piece right here. This is the thing that the shift selector slides up and down on, or the shift collar, what the shift collar slides up and down on, I should say. So when the shift collar, it'll go over this guy, and then this guy will slide in and out, like so. And I don't think the direction of this guy matters a whole lot. It might, but I'm not 100% sure. I usually just throw them together, and if something doesn't fit right, or the bearing doesn't sit all the way down on the top, I usually flip this guy around, or whatever the case may be. But now I'm trying to explain all this stuff, I'm probably going to lose track of how it goes together. But I'll get her. Not too worried about it. So next we have the 4th gear synchro, or this is another 5th gear synchro, I believe. We're just going to check that guy out. We're going to be pitching all this shit anyways, but... And then next we have is 5th gear. So 5th gear is just going to come off like so. It has a roller bearing in the middle of it as well, but this is just a hard gear right here. And what you want to inspect on a lot of the gears is the engagement teeth on the gear. You want to make sure that all those engagement teeth have a nice point to them, and they're not like burred up or rounded off, or rounded off. Because when they're rounded off, it doesn't like to grab the gear, and a lot of times they'll grind because the gear engagement teeth are rounded off. Okay, so after 5th gear, we're going to pull out this roller bearing assembly. So this roller bearing assembly pretty much just looks like this. It's kind of like a big spacer thing, and then you have a roller bearing on either side of it. So the top part is where 5th gear rides, like so. So 5th gear sits on here, and then 4th gear sits on the bottom of it. So I'm just kind of laying all these parts out as they come. Next is going to be 4th gear, like I was saying, another just a gear to inspect. This one's a little bit beat up. I might have another 4th gear upstairs. I might have to throw in here. And here's the other chunk of that roller bearing that would sit on this spacer piece right here. So that's going to all go like that, with one of the gears on top and one of the gears on the bottom. It's going to sit on there something like that. And then we have another synchro. We're going to be inspecting the synchro ring, and I'm trying to find a bad synchro here to justify putting these carbon ones in, but a lot of these are kind of burred up pretty bad, actually. Like this one's burred up pretty good. So it's a good thing we got new synchros coming. Or it's a good thing we're putting them in, I should say. So we have another shift collar here, another shift collar thing that it slides on. You guys will correct me in the comments, I'm sure. But this guy only goes one way, so it drops to this spot and then can't drop any farther, because there's actually stoppers on the inside of this. And you want, pretty much when you inspect these things, you just want to make sure that they slide up and down freely with no resistance. And this one's good, so we're just going to throw that right in the line here of all the parts that I got lined out. And then we're moving on to 3rd gear. So 3rd gear, yep, these synchros are really beat up. I mean, they're not terrible, but they are beat up a little bit. So I'm running out of room in a row here. And then the last piece here is third gear. And then the second, first gear, and reverse gears are actually built into the shaft. So that's something to note for you guys. That's the shaft after everything is taken off of it. And like I said, the second gear, first gear, and reverse gears are all built into the main shaft. And then on the counter shaft, you have an actual gear that spins. It spins on like a roller bearing, like all the other gears on this shaft. Hopefully this shit's making sense. I'm trying to make sense of it, but sometimes it's kind of hard to explain when you can't feel your fucking hands because it's like 10 degrees outside. But yeah, anyways, this gear looking better than fourth, actually. Third gear doesn't look terrible at all, actually, so that's a good sign. Probably just throw this one right back in. Like I said, if I have an extra third or fourth gear, I might utilize them. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do yet, but yeah, it's kind of just a quick video to break down all the parts on the main shaft of the transmission. I plan on doing the counter shaft as well. I might include that right after this, or I might include it in another video. I'm not exactly sure. So now that this shaft is all disassembled, what I like to do is I'm just going to kind of clean out all the oiling holes on here, because there is little holes that are along the shaft, and you want to just make sure there's no metal or any burrs or junk in there. Like as you can see on this one, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's actually quite a bit of junk inside of the shaft right there. So that'll just kind of hinder the oiling ability of the transmission. So I'm going to just go through and clean out all these holes with some brake cleaner and, you know, my air compressor with the blowgun. But this is kind of what everything is looking like so far. I'll grab the camera here and show you guys. So this is the breakdown of the parts as they came out of the out of the main shaft here. So starting here, we got third gear. Little roller bearing is the first thing to go onto the shaft, which goes right onto the gear right above second here. There's like a clear flat space where my finger is right now. That's where that roller bearing is going to ride. And then, you know, after that roller bearing goes on, this is third gear. And then it has this concaved surface here where the synchro rides. So this is the third gear synchro that would go right onto here. And that actually, when you put the synchro on, this is the thing that slows the gear down so everything can kind of mesh and line up, which allows you to, you know, get the shift collar, which is the next piece, this guy right here. It allows the shift collar to go down and kind of crunch onto the gear. So this will, you know, go next. I'm trying to just keep this in order because I'm going to, you know, be replacing the synchros and everything. So here's the fourth gear synchro, and then I think there's two synchros for fifth gear. One of them might be for reverse. I'm not exactly sure, but I know like the shift fork on the top collar here actually does reverse and fifth. So I'm not exactly sure on this stuff, but there is two synchros up top, and I'm assuming they're for fifth gear. So but anyways, yeah, like I said, we're moving on to fourth and fifth right here. This is the fourth gear synchro beat up, like I was saying. And then this is the fourth and fifth gear stack with the roller bearings and that spacer deal in the center of them. And then, you know, obviously the gears all sit in here so the forks or the collar can line up onto them like this. It's kind of just like a big puzzle, guys, that all falls together, and if you misplace something or put a gear on wrong, none of it's going to fit. So you'll know, like, hey, I messed something up. As long as you're not like mixing parts from one tranny to another like I've done in the past. A lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward, as long as you just, you know, make sure what way you took the parts off. Just make sure you put them back on, you know, in that same order, and you should be good. So anyways, going right back up the line, we just got another collar here and another you know, fucking spline thing that the collar rides on. And then we have the bearing up top. This is another roller bearing. And then we have the big old ball bearing up here that sits on the absolute top of the shaft and rides in the case, like I was saying. So yeah, anyways, hopefully this was helpful for somebody trying to figure out their main shaft, or try to figure out their you know, how their gears go back onto the main shaft. I know a lot of people are kind of confused on transmission stuff, it is a little bit confusing, but I'll tell you the Countershaft is way freaking easier. It's just a bunch of gears. You don't have a lot of synchros and sliders and all that kind of stuff on this. You only have really one to worry about, but the only thing here is getting it apart can be a little bit tricky. Usually got to take an impact to this guy and then tip it over and hit it onto the ground or on a piece of wood or something. I might do this next. I might punch this guy out and show you guys the Countershaft quick, and then once that's done we can probably get to throwing the synchros in, but I might cover that in the next video. Alright guys, so I actually ended up grabbing the Countershaft as well, and I'm just going to bust this thing apart quick and show you guys kind of the order and all that stuff. So to start, you kind of just got to mount it in the vise somehow without damaging the gears, which my vise is a little messed up, and it actually worked out to where I could clamp the Countershaft in the vise and be able to take my impact with a 32 mil socket and you know, loosen up the nut that's on the top of this. This nut actually has a paint marking on it, so when you re-torque it back down, try to line up the paint mark, otherwise there is a torque spec as well, but I usually just impact them back on and make sure that paint mark is lined up and you should be good to go. But so the nut is off, and then under the nut there's actually a washer under here, so we're gonna have the washer, there it goes, nut, then the washer, and then we have two of these bearings right here, which these are a little bit tricky to come off, and what I usually do to get this thing apart is I tip it upside down and I hit it on the bench, and this bench is wooden so it shouldn't mess up the threads or anything, but I just grab like first gear right here, which is the large one, and I use it as like leverage to push down as I smack the Countershaft onto the bench. Yeah, this one's a little stubborn. Sometimes they are a little bit stubborn, but you just gotta give her a couple whacks. Alright guys, so I ended up taking it to my cherry picker and just kind of being as careful as I can, pounding the bearings off, because the bearings are kind of what holds everything together. And I got the top one off here. I'm just going to inspect this guy quick, and that seems to be good to go. This top one actually has a groove in it for the snap ring in the case to align the Countershaft up with the main shaft, you know, properly. So you need to make sure that that bearing is on the top and the righting is facing up. This bearing kind of came apart, but I don't think it'll be too big of a deal. Just got to get it pounded back onto here. Yeah, just like so. But we're going to try to get the rest of this apart. Yeah, everything's already kind of loosened up quite a bit, so the gears are naturally going to start wanting to fall off. But there we go. Just takes a couple good whacks, and everything kind of comes apart. So now that this bearing is off of here, I can get this off. And I did not damage the threads or anything like that on this. As long as you hit it nice and square, it doesn't even matter if you put it on the concrete. This shaft is really strong. Just make sure that when you hit it square. You don't hit it crooked, because when you like take the Countershaft and you hit it crooked, you'll hit the threads. You know, and obviously this is a risky game to play. You know, hitting it on concrete or whatever, but fuck it, if it works, it works. So I'm just gonna get this bearing back together here, just like so. Make sure this thing spins good. Probably gonna have to clean this thing out before I put it back in, but she'll be dialed. She'll be dialed. She got a little bit of shit in there, but I'll have to clean that out. So I'm just gonna start laying all this shit out one by one. So the first gear that comes off of here is going to be what is this gonna be? 5th gear. So I'm gonna lay them, you know, the same way they come off. So I'm just gonna take them and set them. This is 4th gear. I'm going to take them and set them just exactly how I'm taking them off. I'm not flipping them. I'm not doing anything like that, so I keep order of all of them. Here's 3rd gear, and they're splined on the inside, and they grab the shaft. And then the outside is obviously the helical gear. So we're just laying everything out here. We got a bearing. I'm going to put this bearing right inside of here. Yeah, there's some metal chunks in this thing. Definitely going to have to give it a good cleaning. Scoot all this up. Okay, and now to the kind of tricky part here is the slider. So the slider is going to come off. Going to inspect this thing, make sure it's all good. Seems fine. So we have our synchro here for second gear. Second gear has a dual synchro. At least on the GSR transmission, it has like a synchro inside of a synchro. So that's kind of cool. This thing is, I can't really tell if it's too beat up or not, but the synchro ring looks good. Yeah, the synchro itself doesn't appear to be too bad. So we're just going to send it. But there's the synchro here, like I was saying. Sorry if I'm sounding like a moron, but I'm trying my hardest here to explain this stuff as best as I can. So that went this way, and then we have the ring, or the slider hub, I think it's called. There's this little bushing right here. I'm not going to touch any of this stuff, I'm just taking it out exactly how I saw it. But this little washer bushing fucking majiggy was in here, so we'll leave that just like that. And then we have the first gear synchro, which appears to be okay. And then last but not least, we have first gear with some more ring things. So just got to make sure that this stuff like this, it's like a little seal or something. It sits inside of first gear right here. The only reason I'm going to take them out is to inspect them, you know, but they fit, it fits nice in there. I don't know what this does, but sure. So first gear is going to stay right there, and then we have one more bearing that comes apart. So this is just a roller bearing, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this guy, clean it all off, make sure there's no, you know, big metal or nothing laying around in here, like all this metal on the bottom of the shaft. I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a bunch of metal on the bottom. Gonna make sure all this stuff is nice and clean, and yeah, clean everything off, like I was saying. Sorry if I'm fucking repeating myself. I'm gonna clean all this stuff off, and then get the synchros installed, and then reassemble everything, but that'll be in the next video. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the little breakdown here of the transmission and all the stuff that kind of goes with it. So I'm going to give you one more view of everything kind of broken down. Like I said, I have everything laid out. This is my socket that I used for you know, getting this thing apart. But it goes nut, bearing, gears, hub, slider, fucking synchros, gears, shaft. Here it is. What a beast. I've actually stripped out, oh, rip. I've actually stripped out the bottom gears on this, because this is where the differential will ride on. It'll ride on that bottom gear there, and I've actually stripped those out from, you know, just horsepower. I've broken a lot of stock transmissions in my day, and yeah. But anyways, that's going to be it. I got to get these cases cleaned up. I'm going to clean out the cases as best as I can. I'm not going to replace any of the bearings because they all appear to be good. And I'm just going to get those detent springs from Speed Factory that improve the shifter feel, considering I was missing one. And then I think that's really all I'm going to do to the transmission, other than put the carbon synchros in it. And then new seals. I'll do that as well. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was informative. And me and Max are going to head on in the house and have a couple beers and go to bed. So have a great night, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.